morning, everyone. I'm first time in US and it's quite interesting to be here. Such a huge, beautiful country, beautiful greenery. I had a different image about US before from movies and so on and so forth. But it looks like a much more friendly country
much greener
than it looks in the movies. So today I wanted to share with you, being a student of the Veda and Upanishads in the light of Sri Aurobindo, I was always wondering where this knowledge is coming from, and Sri Aurobindo's knowledge. And for me, it was important to make that link. It seems that it was also important for Sri Aurobindo to make that link. For some reason, he was always engaged in the translations of the Veda. Till his last days, we can find notes on the Veda still dating till the last days of his life. And I was wondering why he makes that so important for himself and for us. And then I understood, because of this historical depth. It is not the yoga he started to do. It was starting from the beginning of time by the Vedic rishis. And Veda cannot be easily interpreted and understood without Sri Aurobindo's light. I don't know any interpretation which could give us some coherent explanation what is being spoken in the Veda. So today I want us to look into this historical depth, into the perspective where we are coming from and where we are heading at. After studying Veda for quite some time, for 2 decades, I come to the conclusion that in the Veda they knew about the evolution. It is the gospel about evolution. They speak about immortality. Immortality as the outcome of our journey. They call human beings, man is the ever-advancing pilgrim. What a beautiful vision. Man is ever-advancing pilgrim. He is always on the way, on the road. His journey is a constant battle with himself, with the forces of darkness which enter him, and the forces of light which support him. And as Shraddha yesterday beautifully described the Vedic rishis, that they are still there, as Sri Aurobindo says, they are still there waiting to assist our journey. They started our journey as representative of our group soul. It is our plan, our vision, that's what we are here to do. And that's why Veda is so important for India and the whole world. And if you look into the Indian culture, you will find that everything is based on the Veda. Everything. And I'm not afraid to say this, because there are tendencies in academia to say, what about minor philosophies? No, there are no minor philosophies. They are all related to the Veda. Either they deny some aspect of the Vedic vision, or when Vedic vision became already, void of meaning, became very, ritualistic, then of course they criticize it, but that is all in reference to the Veda. The whole culture, all the epic stories, all the darshanas, all the shastras, just take any tantras, all of them refer to the Veda. So what is this grand vision of the Veda? Why it is so important? So Sri Aurobindo spoke on the Veda in this way. Veda is the earliest gospel we have of man's immortality. Now this word immortality is used differently by Sri Aurobindo than it is used by Advaitic vision in post-Vedic period in India. It's not immortality of the soul. It is granted. The soul is immortal. We don't need to realize it. We are already there. As he says, heaven we always possessed. It is earth we never possessed. So the immortality on earth, that's what he's talking about. The central conception of the Veda is the conquest of the truth out of the darkness of ignorance, and by the conquest of the truth, the conquest also of immortality. The conquest of the truth. Look at this bright movement. It has nothing to do with meditation or falling into some peaceful state where everything is given. No, there is an active position towards the truth, fighting for it, conquering it out of the darkness of ignorance. It is hidden there. It has to be discovered. This is the sacrifice. The Veda is perfect and beautiful in its coherence and its unity. This is an important statement because all other scholars will say that Veda is not coherent, it's not totally meaningful, we do not know what they meant, or that the text is corrupted some way or another. They try to reinterpret it, to change the words, to read it in their own way and never realize what it means. But for Sri Aurobindo, it is perfect and it is coherent. And he gives us keys with which we can open the Veda. We can see the meaning, the deeper visions of the rishis. Applying his keys and reading these texts, we arrive at visions. We suddenly see and understand at the same time what is meant by this creation. It is felt, it is tangible, it is solid. It's not some kind of imagination or conceptualization of some philosophy or theory. It's very concrete, and Vedic knowledge is concrete. I think he also learned from the Veda and found in the Veda his own language. That's why Savitri is so beautiful and so powerful, because he uses the same, approach of the Veda and the same imagery. I did the research, 3 years research, funded by Government of India, Vedic imagery in Sri Aurobindo's Savitri. And I was amazed what you see there. It's Veda constantly, on every page, all the implications, all the presumptions are Vedic. So, Vedic vision. I will be giving you an outline which will help us to understand why it was important for Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. The beginning. I take texts from different texts, I will be referring to them, from Shatapatha Brahmana, not from the Veda, but from the Brahmana. But it's important that I make my own selection of texts to explain briefly what I want to say. At the beginning was the Self. He was alone. He looked around and didn't find anybody else except himself. I'm everywhere, here, there, and everywhere. Only me. He said, I am, but there was no other name to say, for he was alone. What else could he say about himself? That he is. There is nothing else to say. The text is more complex. I'm not going into it. If you want, we can stop and then discuss later. Then he became afraid. Then he thought, whom am I afraid of? If I alone am, and fear vanished. And text says, yes, fear comes from another. So, anticipating otherness of self, he got into the state of shrinking fear. He because fear, bhaya, is actually to diminish your own appearance, to diminish your own presence, to shrink back to yourself, so to say. Not to expand, not to be flowing normal way, but to withdraw from everything back to your center. This is what fear is, and it's very beautifully presented in the Veda. So fear comes always from otherness of self, or from anticipation that there is some other there, whom he wanted to find, but he didn't find. Then he was not happy. Sanaiva me sadvitiyam aichat. He wanted another. So that fear, that shrinking, maybe showed him or gave him a hint that he wants to be flowing into another. There was already in him something of that kind, wanting to find himself in another. Mother described it differently, beautifully. He was looking for additional ananda. So he had in his supreme identity, he is totally blissful. It's not fair to say that he was not happy. He was totally happy. But he wanted to have the ananda of unity, which he didn't have. The second one with whom he could identify, with whom he could have relations. That's what he was looking for. The reason for creation. So there are many texts, beautiful texts, from Taittiriya, from Brihadaranyaka, from Shatapatha Brahmana. I go straight to Sri Aurobindo. Why should Brahman, asks Sri Aurobindo, who is perfect, absolute, infinite, needing nothing, desiring nothing, at all throw out force of consciousness to create in itself these forms, these worlds of forms? Why? Desiring nothing, needing nothing, infinite, absolute, perfect. If then, being free to move or remain eternally still, to throw itself into forms or retain the potentiality of form in itself, it indulges its power of movement and formation, it can be only for one reason: for delight.
Because it's good.
There is joy in it. There is joy in being lost, in being found, in being strong and weak and alone and with others. There is joy in everything. The Supreme, says the Mother, decided to exteriorize himself, objectivize himself, in order to have the joy of knowing himself in detail, detailed joy, to be able to see himself. He never saw himself objectively. He saw himself only subjectively. So the first thing in himself which he exteriorized was the knowledge of the world and the power to create it. This knowledge, consciousness and force began its work, and in the Supreme Will there was a plan. And the first principle of this plan was the expression of both the essential joy and the essential freedom, which seemed to be the most interesting feature of this creation. Essential joy and essential freedom. These two things we are constantly seeking, without which we cannot be. We need to be free, and we have right for joy. So how could he become another if he alone was? It's a difficult task. Can you become another if you are alone, everywhere only you? Oh, there are so many propositions. I heard so many interesting propositions. You can imagine yourself, or you can do this, or you can create for yourself something. But it would be you, in your awareness. You would know that it is you. How can you become really another? What would you do?
Forget yourself.
Forget yourself. He had to forget himself. He couldn't be another, but he could forget that it was him. Yeah? So it is him anyhow, but he doesn't know that it is him. So the first creation, the eternal night. Night, says the Veda, was born out of the shining truth of the supreme power. So the night was born out of light, not light out of night. We could say that the Bible is not totally correct. Let it be light, the God cannot say. God could say, let it be night, because He is light. So from the night, the waters of the inconscient came into being, and from the waters of the inconscient, the time was born. The creator of all that moves. Out of himself, he cast a luminous shadow, all these worlds, from the superconscient to the inconscient, says Aitareya, gradually denying himself, withdrawing his supreme knowledge from his supreme power, becoming unaware of these worlds as himself. The gradual fall. There is a beautiful passage in Savitri, in the enigma of the darkened vasts, in the passion and self-loss of the infinite. A contradiction founds the base of life. The eternal, the divine reality has faced itself with its own contraries. Being became the void, and conscious force nescience, and walk of a blind energy, and ecstasy took the figure of world pain. It's interesting that where pain is coming from. It is because the consciousness, he became unaware of himself. So his ecstasy was turned into world pain. His energy became blind energy. It's not seeing anymore. It doesn't know what it is. It has this potential, this power, but it is not him anymore. But what is interesting here, we could see that all these four emanations, and these are the four emanations of the mother's story, consciousness in light, bliss, truth, and life, which fell into their opposites. We can immediately see that the darkness is nothing but light without awareness of the Supreme. And the suffering is nothing but bliss, which lost this contact with the Supreme. And the falsehood is nothing but truth, which is not aware of the Supreme. And death is life, which lost the contact with the Supreme. It can't be anything else. That's why nature is him doing his work. That very broad term, nature. She is constantly preoccupied to manifest him. So these four emanations fell into their opposites, as Mother says in her story. Consciousness in light was first. It dragged awareness back to the state of darkness, which immediately was the consequence for the bliss to fall into suffering, which became the consequence for the truth to become falsehood, which became finally dragged the eternal life into death. And finally he could die. He couldn't die before, so to say. Now, after that, the Supreme Mother Aditi turned to him, as Mother says in her story, and told him, look what happened. These four emanations, these creators, they turned into opposite. What shall we do? and he told her, find in me a greater power and precipitate that, go down and bring them to their own self-awareness. So the Divine Mother looked for that power within, and she has several stories about this. I will tell you a longer story. She first found the gods, and she offered the gods to plunge into the darkness and to bring these fallen emanations back to their self-awareness, and gods were afraid. They didn't want to go into the darkness. They refused to go. So she looked again deep into the Supreme, and she found another force of love. The greater power of consciousness, the greater power of bliss, the greater truth, and the greater life, as she says. These four greater in one being of love, which decided, which agreed to plunge into the darkness and to bring it to its self-awareness. In the Vedas it is Agni, the first avatar, the immortal among mortals, who brings the whole nature up. That nature is, because of Agni, is there, hidden within. So this light of this power of love which descended is what we represent here, the psychic being. And this is what I wanted to talk today. It is about this emergence of the soul within the nature. So, the second creation. This was the second creation. He suggested to her to bring another force down into these fallen emanations. So in the Veda, when the first involution took place, says the Veda, and the light was turned into the darkness, the creation became as if unsteady, shithilam iva, adhruvam iva. And interestingly, Veda says iva, as if unsteady, as if shaky. There is no other way to describe it. So so the Supreme Self had to enter and to support it from within. So when he entered, as the Veda says, himself by himself, Atmanatmanam abhisamvidesha, the creation became steady. So night could sustain, pain could sustain, falsehood could sustain, because he entered. Death could sustain for a while and do its work. And there is a beautiful passage in Savitri which speaks about it. When all was plunged in the negating void, non-being's night could never have been saved if being had not plunged into the dark. Is it not beautiful? It's not only that saved in terms of that being, fallen being could not be saved, but also its formation of darkness could not have been saved. So, in the mother's story, it was, of course, the force of love, which was delegated out of the Supreme and plunged into the darkness. In the Vedas it was Agni, the immortal among mortals. It is because of his presence that everyone is evolving and seeking after the higher knowledge of the Supreme. I have the whole presentation, but we don't have a projection. There are Buddha's pictures here to show the first avatar laying down at the bottom. Very beautiful pictures. I can send you the link afterwards if you want to see these pictures. So, the evolution. From this point, the evolution starts. A soul of the divine is here slowly awaking out of the involution and concealment in the material unconscious. This is all about evolution. How else evolution would take place? What would evolve then, if not the soul, which is changing the forms, the instruments of its expression or its manifestation? There is a beautiful passage in Savitri. He sleeps in the atom and the burning star. He sleeps in man and God and beast and stone. Because he is there, the inconscient does its work. Because he is there, the world forgets to die. Here's the humor. The world had to die actually, but it forgot to die. So we forgot to die and we go on. So according to Sri Aurobindo, there are this terrestrial evolutionary working, I'm quoting him, of nature has a double process, and that is important to see. There is an outward visible process of physical evolution, with birth as its machinery, for each evolved form of body housing its own evolved power of consciousness is maintained and kept in continuity by heredity. This is Darwinist approach. Body has to have, through genome, has to pass all the changes to other bodies to the future. That's why we have to have children. All the changes are passed to our children, and it goes on. There is at the same time an invisible process of soul evolution, with rebirth into ascending grades of form and consciousness as its machinery. So at the same time soul evolves. We reincarnate, we come here, we take this body, we change through our perception, through our interaction of the soul with the instruments of knowledge, of mind, life and body. We make changes and we pass those changes to our children. And that's why maybe it is better to have children later. Like Dasharatha had when he was 72,000 years old. That's way around. He accumulated a lot of consciousness and could pass it to another body. So you see this beautiful picture. On one hand, the bodies are born. So I have my child who has child who has child. So my grandchildren, my grandson becomes the body for me. I will come to that body. I am building up in time my own body. Otherwise, Darwinistic view cannot be sustained. Why there should be a change? What is this survival of the fittest? It is not totally clear why it should survive, why not the weakest should survive. What's this idea about that the strongest has to survive? And where the strength and comparison are coming from? So there must be some other element, soul element, which determines this evolution. And here I come to this major thing. From the point of view of Sri Aurobindo's yoga, and that is very important, there are two elements in us. One is unborn self, above the head, so to say Jivatma, and the other is Antaratman, or Antaryamin. There are many names, Chaitya Purusha, Angushthamatra Purusha. All these names are known in the heart of man as a projection of the unborn self. And in between these two, there is something going on. The one is evolving, the psychic being is evolving, and the unborn self is supporting that evolution. The psychic being evolving and invoking the presence of the unborn self, seeking for it in nature, and the unborn self constantly descending and supporting it with power. And this is that Maha Kundalini from above which descends upon us when the psyche is invoking the unborn self. So Sri Aurobindo's description is very beautiful. The true being may be realized in one or both of two aspects, the self, or Atman, and the soul, or Antaratman, psychic being, Chaitya Purusha. The difference is that one is felt as universal, the other as individual, supporting the mind, life, and body. When one first realizes the Atman, one feels separate from all things, existing in itself and detached. You remember the silent Brahman experience of Sri Aurobindo? He saw himself as in the movie, totally detached. When one realizes a psychic being, it is not like that. For this brings the sense of union with the divine and dependence upon it, and soul consecration to the divine alone, and the power to change the nature and discover the true mental, the true vital, and the true physical being in our oneself. Both realizations are necessary for this yoga. But if you observe them, it's quite unique, because for the Atman, for the unborn self, everything is the divine. Good or bad, everything is accepted as a divine. It looks at everything with equal eyes. But for the psychic, it's totally opposite. Psychic looks nothing, searches nothing but the divine. It looks for the divine alone, and everything which is imperfect it cannot stand or take. So these two attitudes, seemingly contradictory, but both are necessary for this yoga. They create this dynamism. It reminds me of evening talks and where there was a story about Ramakrishna. Maybe you remember that story. Somebody brought it to Sri Aurobindo to comment that one sannyasi came to his ashram with a lady, with prostitute. Sannyasi with prostitute together. So Ramakrishna was furious. Get out, I spit on your Vedanta, and so on and so forth. And they asked Sri Aurobindo to comment, and she says, but because sannyasi said, why you're so angry? I am Brahman, she is Brahman, you are Brahman, everything is Brahman. This is this view, this spiritual view. And Sri Aurobindo answered, yes, sannyasi is right, it's true, everything is Brahman, there is no difference. But Ramakrishna was looking at it from the psychic point of view. And this is what it creates, total rejection. You cannot accept it because it is not manifesting the divine here. So this dynamism is important. So I'm coming to the end of the presentation. I want to show you the third creation in Sri Aurobindo's light, the supramental manifestation. So the first creation, I call them like this, these are stages, of course. The first creation was the fall of the spirit, which laid out the field for its future manifestation. I find this in all the texts in the Veda, and I could never crack this vision. I could never understand it because it's in such a language that you can't, it's very cryptic, but after Sri Aurobindo explained it in his writings, you can understand it, you can see it there. There are really stages. First, the stages layout of all the manifestations. Take Aitareya, beautiful text. The first stage, he created all these worlds. Second stage, he created Purusha, who will be inhabiting these worlds. The Purusha are the faculties of consciousness, exactly which are recreating here the psychic presence and the psychic being by plunging into the darkness of this infinite ocean. They call to the universal Purusha, and he descends and they grow. This is everywhere, in every text, but it is not seen. Nobody comments on it, only Sri Aurobindo. He has a beautiful work, very short, which is called The Involved and Evolving Godhead. It is written in the 30s, after already, when he was in his seclusion. There, everything, stage by stage, all the Vedic version. So the first is the manifestation of the field in which the being is to be manifested, these four emanations. All the levels of consciousness were unfolded gradually, creating all the worlds in the involutionary order, which we will have now to climb. The ladder is built. From light to darkness, from the superconscient to the inconscient, from spirit to matter. The second creation was the plunge of the Supreme into the darkness of material inconscience, bringing the aspect of the self into existence in terms of individual growth and realization. From this point, matter becomes animated by the spirit. And the evolution takes place. It goes on till psychic being is fully individualized and formed, and the instruments of its expression, body, life, and mind, are fully developed to embody the spirit. Second. Now, we have constant contradiction between our inner life, where we are totally conscious of the divine, and our outer life, where we are less and less conscious until we are unaware. So all the grades are within us. We are of double nature. There is a constant dialogue, contradiction, fight, change. This is called the sacrifice. The transformation of nature, of unconscious nature into conscious, by the presence of the being, conscious being within us. So this contradiction can be resolved or reconciled by the supramental descent, or the supramental manifestation, let us say. Descent is not a proper word. I always think in terms of descent, but actually supermind is evolving. It's hidden within the nature. And it reconciles nature with the soul. There will be no more contradiction between the two. Enthrones the psychic being as the Lord of creation and gives it direct access to higher realms of being and consciousness, establishing the law of the spirit in the whole nature. Now, I'm coming to Sri Aurobindo's triple transformation, because that is the key of all his vision and philosophy. There are three different statuses of the divine, says Sri Aurobindo, of the divine consciousness: individual, universal, and transcendental. There are also different statuses of transformation. First is the psychic transformation, in which all is in contact with the divine through the individual psychic consciousness. Next is the spiritual transformation, in which all is merged in the divine in the cosmic consciousness. And the third is the supramental transformation, in which all becomes supramentalized in the divine Gnostic consciousness. Now, psychic transformation. The psychic being is a flame born out of the divine and luminous inhabitant of the ignorance, grows in it till it is able to turn it towards the knowledge. It is a deputy of the unborn self, or Atman, in the forms of nature, the individual soul, supporting mind, life and body, standing behind them, watching and profiting by their development and experience. It learns from them how to be in time and space. It learns how to grow here. If it can come forward into the front and govern overtly and entirely this outer nature of mind, life and body, then these can be cast into the soul images of what is true, right and beautiful. And in the end, the whole nature can be turned towards the real aim of life, the supreme victory, the ascent into spiritual existence. The spiritual transformation. Now here is the catch. The psychic being can, by the spiritual influx, enlarge itself. The same psychic being. It's not other transformation. It can grow, enlarge itself, and embrace the whole world in an intimate communion and oneness. Or it may become aware of its eternal companion and elect to live forever in his presence, in an imperishable union and oneness as the eternal lover with the eternal beloved. Which of all its spiritual experiences is the most intense in beauty and rapture? That's what he had in Alipur jail, when he saw everywhere Narayana, Krishna, in all forms, in all beings, beloved. All these are great and splendid achievements of our spiritual self-finding, but they are not necessarily the last end and entire consummation. More is possible. This is Sri Aurobindo. More is possible. The supramental transformation. The psychic transformation after rising into the spiritual change. Again, psychic, already universal, embracing the whole world, has then to be completed, integralized, exceeded and uplifted by a supramental transformation. In supermind is the integrating light, the consummating force, the wide entry into the supreme Ananda. The psychic being uplifted by that light and force can unite itself with the original delight of existence from which it came, overcoming the dualities of pain and pleasure, delivering from all fear and shrinking the mind, life and body. It can recast the contacts of existence in the world into terms of the divine Ananda. Everything becomes the contacts with the divine Ananda. There is no end to the bliss in time and space. This is the vision of the Veda and Sri Aurobindo. The Veda didn't go that far because they had their own immediate sacrificial work to do. And as Sri Aurobindo says, it is because of the Vedic rishis who could not continue their work of the sacrifice due to the failure, he says, of the Vedic rishis to transform earthly life because humanity was not ready. It requires the participation of humanity, it seems. You cannot do it on your own, as we know it from the Mother also. The transformation of the physical nature is not possible if the humanity is not ready. So that we had a split on the Western and Eastern paradigm. In India they took, they concentrated on the spirit, neglecting nature, and in the Western paradigm they concentrated upon the occult sciences and the development of the material paradigm, neglecting the spirit. But now from the West, everybody is looking towards India, towards this knowledge, and from India everybody needs that other part. So you can see there is the movement to meet, and that is what Sri Aurobindo and Mother present for us. It's this new Vedic vision of transformation of nature. So this awakening of the soul within the nature is our next step in evolution. So that's basically what I wanted to say. Thank you.
If there are any questions, please feel free to have 15 minutes.
Will you take any questions?
Yes.
In the Vedic images, is there a clear distinction, just like Sri Aurobindo has made about psychic being and the Atman?
Of course.
What are those words being used?
Yeah, this I must say, yes, that was my idea to make this historical overview, that psychic being emerges later. There is psychic presence in the universal sense in nature. It is in flowers, in animals, in human beings, but the formed individual psychic being is not there. It takes time to individualize it. The individual psychic is that achievement what we are looking for. Psychic presence is here. It's even much more pure in the plants and flowers than in human beings, as Mother says. It's more intense, but it is not individualized.
But in the Vedic description, Vamma, Vedic Vamma, what are those words? Sri Aurobindo has clearly used two different words, psychic being and Atman, to really characterize them, that the one is an evolving.
Yeah, Antaratman,
Yes.
Angushtamatra Purusha, and later Chaitya Purusha. Angushtamatra Purusha used in the Vedas. It was well known, the presence in the heart. I do not know why it was not given so much importance.
Yes.
It's a very interesting thing. Maybe because there were many other experiences, like Nirvana or Samadhi. India is very rich with all these occult experiences and spiritual experiences. And this one segment, it comes later in the Bhakti movement. You can see it more in the, Mirabai and Kabir and all that movement which came later, Bhakti period. I think this was the period when we became more aware of the individualization of the psychic presence as being. But in the Upanishads and the Vedas, you will not find that particular interest in the individualized form. Rishis always speak about humanity as a whole. We, for us, for human beings, and not only human beings, for the whole nature, for all creatures, for plants and animals. So we are all included in their view. There is no individualized sense. That's why it comes later. That's what most probably we are entering into the stage of this awareness of the individualized divine presence within us. So this shows that there is an evolutionary process. It evolves to this stage. It wasn't always like that. It is that what the divine wanted to create. He wanted to be many, as he says. Bahusyam, may I be many. How can you be many if you alone are? So this was the way to create many supreme individuals. And it is not just a play or a game that you create them as toys, and you play with them and then you drop them. It's not like that. It is much more fundamental. And that is the difference between the Sri Aurobindo's approach and Advaitic approach, for example, where it is considered that he plays with his personalities, his creations, for a while and then he drops them. Or Shiva closes his eyes and opens his eyes and says, "Oh, I'm still here." This is an approach which was trying to explain the world, but nobody dared to think that he really wanted to be many. They thought it is a metaphor of some kind, Be many. Be many what? The same me in many forms? No, he wanted to be many. I hope I'm not shocking you with these news. To be many. Yes.
Am I?
Yes.
When you talked about the self was alone, I'm a recovered Catholic, maybe I shouldn't say that, but I am. And Adam and Eve came up. And I never believed the story around Adam and Eve, but could that be that this first Adam, happened to be a man, was alone, and then God gave him Eve? Could this person who wrote that know what you know, that the lonesome self was alone and wanted somebody else?
With Adam and Eve, it's interesting because Eve represents consciousness, and Adam, the being, he was always dreaming somewhere looking away, and Eve was looking for evolution, and gave him this apple, and dragged him into evolution, dragged him out, involved. That's why Eve is blamed constantly for blamed for being sinful. But truly speaking, that sin is the beginning of evolution. And mother looks at it totally different. She considers the snake who tempted Eve as the power of evolution.
So out of that came this story about Adam and Eve. And
it's a symbolic story, of course.
The West believe. Yeah, it's a symbol.
Of the fall of the being and consciousness, of the fall and the evolution of the being and consciousness.
I feel better now.
It makes sense, no?
Yeah, it does.
Yes.
I heard that Agastya Rishi tried this physical transformation, say, in Pondicherry itself, and he reached up to certain stage, but he did try, he and his wife Aurobindo, some form of physical transformation before Sri Aurobindo in Vedic time.
Possibly. It's possibly. I saw the temple of Agastya Rishi, and we even published somewhere in Aurobindo today the photo of that statue, 12th century. You will be surprised. His face is Sri Aurobindo's face.
Yes.
I was shocked. I thought, no, it can't be true. Yeah, about the Agastya Rishi who lived in the Vedapuri, it was called. Puducherry Vedapuri. And there is a temple there nearby with Agastya Rishi temple. He lived there, yes, in that place. And Sri Aurobindo has something to do with Agastya Rishi. I don't know what, and he commented on his hymns, also beautiful comments. Especially this comment when Agastya Rishi was looking beyond, this dialogue between Indra and Agastya Rishi, where Indra comes and complains that why do you want to bypass me, the Svar world, the over-mental worlds, and you want to jump into the beyond. There you will find nothing. Even your intention to know the divine will disappear there. You will not remember what you wanted there. So what are you looking there for? It's quite interesting. Let us, and he says, let us kindle the fire here. That is the amritasya chetanam. That is the immortality of consciousness of immortality. Let us do sacrifice here, together, and you will achieve and reach and remember what you wanted to achieve here in time and space. And that was the shift. And Sri Aurobindo comments that he says this is very important to him because it shows that there were two tendencies, and Vedic rishis chose the tendency of transformation.
There's also the story about him crossing Vindhya and telling Vindhya, don't grow until I come back, or something like that.
Yeah, they bow down.
Yes. I don't know what the significance of that particular story.
This I don't, it's a later story from Puranas already. Yeah. But in Puranas are many stories which are like beautiful stories.
What is your current area of work, research?
I am doing my Vedic studies, of course, and in our university we started a very interesting experiment, at least from my view. They had this before, SOL, Science of Living, we try to bring these values into the academic environment. We want students to look at their life from this conscious perspective.
Is it something accessible online?
Yeah, definitely. We have all our references on our website in the university. And also we developed the Foundations of Indian Culture, which we, it's the third year. So first 2 years SOL. And also we bring all this knowledge from the Vedas, Upanishads, Gita. Sometimes it is quite difficult, maybe the age, 18, 21, they are not looking, especially they are afraid of this Advaitic approach, that we will drag them into some kind of samadhi. They want to live. And we try to tell them that our purpose is different, that we are not doing that. We want to bring them the knowledge of Sri Aurobindo, that this life can be beautiful, meaningful. But we succeeded to a certain extent, of course. It has to develop, it has to grow. We need more people to be involved, to be interested in this, to be yogis, as Mother says. Teachers have to be yogis, and how many yogis we have there, it's a question. Some of them.
So here I'm just trying to assimilate all the knowledge that I have, and if you could please validate what I understood thus far. So I've been reading different texts of the Mother and also from what you've said. What I understand is that the psychic being is the Antaratman, and the self is the Jivatman, that is above the self, above, right here, above the Crown Chakra maybe. And then the idea or the expectation is first we realize the psychic being, and the psychic being finally merges with the Jivatman, and there's the ascent and the descent happening, and finally this Jivatman has to go merge with the Paramatman. Am I saying that right, or am I understanding it right?
Well, this is the supramental transformation. We are kind of far away from it. Yeah, but you are right, yes.
Okay, good.
Paramatman has to become part of our life here. The psychic being becomes universal first. Universal is not transcendental. It is including all the worlds here. So it is here, it's not there. And then he gets the access to the transcendental, and the transcendental can pour in all its ananda, consciousness and being into time and space, become a valuable presence here. Presence of that is immortality, immortality of nature, physical body.
So is impersonal self and Jivatman one and the same, right?
They become one and the same. Now they are not the same. We have to individualize. Individualization is exactly that focal point where he wanted to be many. If he does not individualize, he cannot manifest. Manifestation in the universal sense is not manifestation for him. Or it is not total manifestation, or partial, if you will. He wants to be many here, in every form. So he who alone is, will be many. This is a mystery. And psychic being is the greatest mysteries.